When Matthew Perna followed his conscience and his curiosity into the U.S. Capitol on January 6, he had no idea what it would cost him. Like millions of Americans, he had doubts about the outcome of the 2020 election and went to Washington, D.C. to protest, exercising his First Amendment rights the way Americans have done since this country was founded. He was not an insurrectionist and had no plans to overthrow the government. In fact, Matthew Perna was a Bernie Sanders fan until Trump came along and donated twice to Sanders' presidential campaign. So how did a young man, then 36, who was known for his gentle nature and had never been in trouble in his life, get on the wrong side of the Justice Department, facing prison for actions that at any other time in U.S. history would have been treated as civil disobedience? The last thing Matthew Perna expected after turning himself in for nonviolent offenses and pleading guilty was for the government to try to add years behind bars at the 11th hour. But that's exactly what prosecutors were planning. Only they never got the chance.
Matt called me on the phone that Monday after he got done speaking to his attorney, and he was sobbing. And he was stuttering uncontrollably, like I had never heard Matt speak this way before. And I said, Matt, don't worry. I'm crying on the phone with him. Don't worry. God is not going to let you fail.
Jerry Perna was a constant in her nephew Matthew's life. Growing up in a tight-knit Italian family, she said they were always close, and she stayed close to him in the turmoil of his life after January 6th.
The last word I said to him was, I love you. And he said, I love you too, Aunt Jerry. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you lost all your friends because of me.
Matthew Perna's fate was sealed the moment his face appeared on this FBI wanted poster, his aunt said. Suspect number 73 stood out in his red Trump sweatshirt as cameras recorded him inside the Capitol. Roughly 14 minutes that cost him his business, his reputation, and the woman he planned to marry. It also shattered the sanctity of home, where he was shunned and shamed by people he knew and others he'd never met. Jerry said he felt like the walls of Sharpsville, this small town of iron and steel that over the past century had forged 4 generations of their family in western Pennsylvania, were closing in. Then came the call that changed everything.
And I just stepped my foot in the tub, and my phone rang, and it was one of my brothers. And said, Jerry, you need to get a plane ticket and come home. Matt just hanged himself in his garage.
Jerry Perna was 1,000 miles away at home in Florida on that icy Friday night in late February 2022, when her nephew put a rope around his neck and took his last breath. She said he'd been at the mercy of the U.S. justice system for over 13 months.
He was pushed to the point where he didn't feel life was worth living anymore. They robbed him of his spirit. They robbed him of his hope, his will to live. They took his fight away from him.
They broke him.
They completely broke him, and they broke his heart.
And they knew what they were doing.
Yes.
Or at least that was how it felt. Stressful moments in Matthew's case would collide with stressful events in his life, Jerry said, like the hearing the DOJ scheduled for the anniversary of his mother Ronnie's death. As the pressure mounted, those watching over Matthew fretted.
He had a friend who was a caterer. When Matt was a teenager, he used to work with him. That's how he got to know him.
So he's older than him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, much older than him. He's a black gentleman. He's a very good friend of our family's.
Matthew loved him?
Oh, yes. He loved him with all his heart. Different sides of the political arena. But it didn't matter to Matt. They were friends, and he prayed for Matt all the time. He encouraged him daily. And he told Matt, I'm going to bring you some dinner. What time do you want me to come by? And Matt told him to come by around 5:30. And so he went there, and he went up to the porch, and there was a note on the door.
What did it say?
It said, I'm in the garage. Call 911.
What did he do when he found him?
He tried to cut him down, the rope. And actually, one of the police officers that was first on the scene was a friend of Matt's. And he tried so hard, giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for the longest time, because Matt was still warm at that point. But he was gone.
In a town of 4,500 people that spans less than 2 square miles, Matthew Perna's death reached into many homes. In his memory, more than 10,000 people signed the online guest book.
A man about to be sentenced in connection with the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol has died. Matthew Perna was from Mercer County. No cause of death given, but his family says he died of a broken heart.
The stigma of January 6 hung like a dark shroud over the family, and Jerry said threats and hate mail started pouring in, as if the politics of division that tortured her nephew in life followed him without mercy into the grave. Grace that was given to those who burned down businesses and buildings protesting George Floyd's death was not afforded to those protesting an election they believed stolen. The same Department of Justice that, according to the leftist Guardian newspaper, dropped or never filed charges against, on average, 90% of those arrested during the Summer of Love, went after hundreds of January 6 protesters like Matthew Perna with a vengeance. Jerry Perna let us see this note her nephew left behind, etched in his own hand. I sacrificed my freedom when I entered into the Capitol building on January 6th, and in despair took my own life the night I wrote this. It was what the family had feared, and they leaned on Jerry as they often did, no one more so than her brother Larry, who'd already lost his wife, now his oldest son.
Really nice. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas from Dixie. Thank you, guys.
It was heartbreaking. I experienced loss before when Matt's mom died. This was so much worse.
And he wasn't suicidal before January 6th,
No.
before any of this happened.
No, Matt brought people together. That's not a person who's suicidal. That's not a person who isn't enjoying life. It's a person who had a zest for life. And we watched it like a candle losing its flame over 13 months. We watched that candle die.
6 years earlier, Matthew had given up a life teaching English in South Korea to come home, first to nurse his mother Ronnie through leukemia, then to help his father Larry battle Parkinson's. A devoted son and a wanderer, as these postcards attest, filled with memories and insight from distant lands. With his flair for languages, he had mastered Thai and was almost fluent in Korean. But his heart belonged to this country. A love affair that began when he was little.
He loved this country, and this country destroyed him in many ways. Its citizens, the media, the government, they destroyed him like he was nothing.
Do you remember the last thing he said to you, your last conversation?
Yes. He had delivered the news about what they were going to be doing, how they were going to add enhancements. They were going to add time to his sentence, and he was having a hard time talking. He was having to clear his throat like he was choking, and he kept checking the rearview mirror of his car. He was very anxious. He had some restless nights and was actually coughing up blood, that he had himself so worked up.
From stress?
From the stress.
So it must have been difficult for you to see him like that.
Oh my, yes. He literally rotted away from the inside out.
43-year-old Marcus Priester grew up a stone's throw away from his friend in one of the 5 small communities that stretch across the Shenango Valley. He told us that, unlike Matthew, he was a loner, and for him, the loss was beyond measure.
I had so much anger in my heart. And I prayed for God to take that anger away. Yeah, I'll never fill that void.
Best friend you ever had?
Best friend I ever had.
I suppose it's a gift.
I was blessed to be a part of his life. You know, he had many friends. I was just one of his.
Marcus and Matthew found common ground in running, pushing each other along the muddy trails that weave throughout the rich green forest that lined the valley where they trained for ultramarathons. At times, Marcus said, Matthew would ditch his shoes. You didn't run barefoot with him?
I tried it one time at a beach, and it didn't go so well.
But he would.
He sure would. Yeah.
Why?
He had a love for the nature, a love for the earth and all the elements.
He wanted to feel it through his feet.
Yeah, he loved to breathe it in and to be a part of it.
These are not the actions of a weak person.
No. This man has run 15 miles of mountainous trail, and he ran it barefoot. I couldn't believe. I mean, he got back, and we took a good look at his feet, and they weren't looking too good.
As they ran, Marcus said they would often talk politics. At first, Matthew did not share his support for Trump.
Oh, we argued some and tossed it around quite a bit, and I opened his eyes. We like Trump because we're open-minded, and we're all about looking outside the box. And when you got a guy that's stepping up against the establishment, he was the first political leader I ever heard talk about fake news. We love that because we knew there is an agenda. I think everybody should know that by now. And if you're not walking in line with that agenda, look out.
Some people would say, but he's a white supremacist and a racist, and he's divisive, and he's offensive, and he's xenophobic, and he's misogynist, treats women badly, unpresidential. It's a long list.
Yeah, there sure is. Yeah, and a lot of it's, I would say most of that is not true.
Joseph R. Biden Jr. is elected the 46th president of the United States.
The results of the 2020 election made no sense to either of them, Marcus said, and drew them to D.C. on January 6, along with another friend, Stephen Ayers, then 38. They hoped Vice President Mike Pence would send contested results back to state electors for a closer look. It wasn't the first Trump rally Marcus had gone to with Matthew, and he told us the scene was familiar, the kind of crowd you'd find at any ball game.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard today.
When they joined the sea of Trump supporters heading for the Capitol, Marcus said violence was the last thing on their minds. So what they found when they got there surprised them.
There were people all around me, and this crowd was forcing me forward, and it was hard to move away. These were mostly, larger, stronger men. I felt a military presence, a military-style presence. I don't know who these people were. They didn't seem like the same kind of people that I was with at the rally.
So there was a noticeable shift.
Yes, in everything, in the energy, in the people that were there. Yeah.
That happened the moment you reached the Capitol?
Yes.
He recalled being swept up.
The crowd was so violent, and it went from just peaceful people, and all of a sudden it was like people all around me pushing and like forcing their way, and there was people coming out with tear gas, and I said, that's close enough. And I had turned back, and I'd lost track of Matt. And I take myself back to that day over and over, and I wish I could have grabbed him and made sure that he didn't go forth, to go through that way.
What lay ahead for Matthew is described in the notes an FBI agent took at his first interview a week later. He and his friend, Stephen Ayers, managed to stay together as they approached the Capitol from the west side. This was the scene outside the Senate wing doors less than 10 minutes before they entered the building. Perna stated there was no police presence at the top of the stairs, which surprised them. A mob of people started pushing their way into the doorway, pushing him inside the Capitol building. That's where we first see Matthew Perna in security camera footage, caught up in that mob of people. Now you can see a line of police blocking the entrance, and Matthew appeared trapped between those attacking them from behind and officers in front fighting back. He managed to wrestle the flagpole away and kept his arms mostly raised to protect his face from the hard edge of a police shield that struck him over and over. Somehow the use of unnecessary or excessive force was never raised in his case, and the DOJ would not comment when we asked, not until all January 6 cases are over. Once the mob burst into the Senate hallway, Matthew stayed a few minutes, at times filming, mostly observing. Police stood down, people wandered in and out, and the tension seemed to ease.
Hey, we love our cops.
Then, according to the FBI case notes, an officer led them through the building. He was picked up briefly with Stephen Ayres on this police body cam footage we found as we tried to retrace his steps. After exiting on the south side a little after 3 p.m., it appeared Matthew walked this way, stopping at the Columbus doors, where we found him on camera again. By now, he seemed to be sucked into the unrest, first tossing a water bottle, then with a baton in hand. He then went on to the north side, where at one point he tossed a pole at a closed door. No police visible, no damage, but some regret, expressed in a post on Instagram later, where he wrote, "I foolishly allowed myself to get drawn into the negative energy emanating from that building." Matthew Perna was not charged with a violent crime, and in these email records from his case files, the Assistant U.S. Attorney Nihar Mohanty stated there is no evidence that he causes any property damage or threatened anyone with the flagpole. From the start, Matthew saw things that did not fit the official narrative, and later that night loudly called out those he believed responsible in this Facebook Live video recorded with his friend Stephen Ayres and a woman they called Ash Lee.
Antifa was disguised as Trump supporters today. Yeah. So Antifa wasn't walking around like they typically are, all dressed in black with their anti-fascist symbolism and their shields. Like, they were disguised as Trump people. And they were the ones who really led the charge into the Capitol building.
He had seen Antifa at Trump rallies before and identified tactics he felt exposed their presence.
They were the ones smashing the windows and smashing on the doors and getting it into it with police. And so they were the instigators, like they typically are. Like, that's how they operate. And so they were trying to bait the Trump supporters into kind of following their lead and retaliating and letting a lot of their frustration out.
Pundits, politicians, and the FBI denied Antifa had a role.
Do you have any evidence that the Capitol attack was organized by, quote, fake Trump protesters?
We have not seen evidence of that at this stage, certainly.
They look like Antifa.
But Matthew wasn't the only eyewitness who called out signs of trained instigators.
These are people that love the cops. We love the police, but a few Antifa dressed up as Trump supporters have been causing violence and stirring up violence here at the Capitol steps, and they're playing on the emotions of you and every patriotic American. This is not right.
For years, Trump supporters had been confronted by Antifa at many of their rallies. The menacing all-black uniforms, masked faces, and violent clashes, a constant threat from the moment President Trump was elected. So when masked men started smashing windows, protesters objected and stepped in to stop them, taking out this man first, then tackling another who'd stepped in to finish the job, while the crowd chanted. Time and again, protesters reacted with the same thought as Matthew Perna. And there were other indicators. In this footage from January 6, a plainclothes officer from the Metropolitan Police Department, badge briefly visible, was captured talking to a Capitol Police officer and told him,
"Well, we go undercover as Antifa in a crowd, so Can you put that back in?
And about 2 miles from the Capitol, a transgender left-wing activist, Logan Leslie Grimes, was one of 3 counter-protesters arrested that morning, described by NBC News as Antifa. According to the police report we obtained, Grimes was charged with possession of an unlicensed firearm and unregistered ammunition that police said was found in the trunk of his car. Prosecutors dropped the charges, and Grimes's family declined to comment. Then there's the case of Landon Copeland, an Iraq war veteran and convicted J6 prisoner who clashed with police and later claimed to be part of the secretive anarchist movement. In an open letter, he wrote, "We are Antifa. We stand diametrically opposed to all centralized autocratic fascist governments." In this interview from prison, Copeland told Jim Hoft of the Gateway Pundit he was one of some 250 Antifa members who met in Alexandria, Virginia, the night before January 6th.
Were you familiar with other Antifa activists who were there?
Yes, absolutely. I don't want to go into any names or anything like this because I don't want to endanger their well-being.
Okay.
But yeah, there was meetings beforehand. There was text messages. There was Facebook messages. There was all kinds of stuff.
Say, what made you come out now and come clean?
It's been one of the rules for Antifa members to never declare to law enforcement that they're Antifa members. Like, actually really part of, like, one of our core principles is being an Antifa member.
So far, no one has disputed Copeland's claims, but high-level Antifa members are not known to ever go public or support President Trump, as Copeland claimed he did. We reached out to Rose City Antifa in Oregon, where Copeland is incarcerated, and we're still waiting for a response. Matthew Perna knew none of this when he first spoke out about Antifa, and his world was about to change. First came retribution from Facebook, who took his account down within hours. For someone whose work selling alternative health treatments depended on his online presence,
this is your opportunity to invest in the growth of CBD.
Being censored was a death blow. Then came the FBI. A week later, in the middle of the night, Matthew found out he was on the Bureau's website, and by 9 a.m. the next day, his Aunt Jerry said he'd called the FBI in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, to turn himself in.
He didn't waste a minute. And so they sent 2 FBI agents to my brother's house. I said, maybe you need to get a lawyer. And Matt said, no, I don't think so. I think this is a misunderstanding, Aunt Jerry. I didn't do anything. I didn't break anything. I didn't touch anything. I didn't steal anything. Believe me, once I explain this is all just a huge misunderstanding. That's how he felt. That's how he truly believed this was going to play out.
Matthew Perna wasn't known as a troublemaker. He'd rather spend his time in places like Haiti, doing volunteer mission work, or delivering alkaline water to cancer patients he'd never met, because they couldn't afford the water filtration machines he was selling online. Aunt Jerry said he once gave up a job so an older man wouldn't lose his during a round of company layoffs.
He made friends everywhere he went. He loved playing chess with old people in a park and talking to them and learning about their life. And he just had this way about him that people opened up to him.
Would he talk to anyone?
Anyone. Matt didn't discriminate against anyone. He was just such a kind person.
Aunt Jerry told us she insisted on an attorney, and they went together to meet him.
There was a Biden sign in front of his office. I said, Matt, this guy's a Democrat. He said, it's okay, Aunt Jerry, it's okay. Let's hear what he has to say first. Let's not judge him. And he had 42 years of experience. And he said, oh, this is nothing. This is a piece of cake. He said, have you ever been arrested before? Matt said, no. I don't think he ever had a parking ticket or, nothing. He said, you got nothing to worry about. I've got this.
What they were about to find out, how much politics rather than law would drive Matthew Perna's case and shatter the life he had built.